Small Business Speaker Series. We've brought together some amazing speakers discussing various topics affecting small businesses. This series is sponsored by NBC Universal, PSE&G, New Jersey Innovation Institute, NJIT, ZD Glover Insurance and Financial, Websignia, and Women Tech Makers New Jersey.
Our first speaker today is Gerry Marrone of the Marrone Group. Gerry is also an SBA score consultant and former director of strategy at Bed Bath & Beyond. Today, Gerry will be sharing his expertise in email marketing for small businesses. Please share any comments or questions that you may have in the comment section, and Gerry will respond after the presentation. Gerry, thank you for joining us today.
My name is Gerry Marrone from the Marrone Group, and I will be taking you through a presentation on email marketing for small business, some of the do's, the don'ts, and things that you should be looking out for if you're going to be participating in email marketing for your business. The presentation that you'll see is going to be, hopefully relatively brief, but hopefully informative and get you where you want to get to. It will give you, as I said, some of the do's and don'ts. So we will jump right into that presentation, and let's take a look at the agenda, and we'll walk through what we're going to cover. So the first things that we want to be aware of when you're talking about email marketing is, are you mobile ready? We'll get into why in a few more seconds, but this is a very critical component of your program. The other things, as you see in front of you, we'll be talking about is, do you have permission? How do you use subject lines? How do the numbers really work out? And we'll look at some of the examples that that I have used or have been part of in the past, and take you through how the numbers on those examples will work as well. So the first question you have to ask yourself is really available to you on the next slide. And this is kind of a benchmark of all of your marketing, and it's kind of something that I've used in my career that was taught to me very early on. But what gets measured gets done. The beauty of digital marketing, specifically email, is it's very, very measurable. And you can always tell, where you're going right, where you're going wrong, and allows you to make changes on the fly. So as we get into the email marketing part of this presentation, and we'll be able to take you through kind of the steps that we're talking about, the first thing, again, we want to go back to is that very first question on the agenda, which was, are you mobile ready? And there's a very, very crucial reason to ask that question, and this is why. And think about your own usage and how you use your cell phone. How do you use email marketing in your own consumer behavior and your own consumer life? So if you're going to be participating in an email marketing program to your consumer marketplace or even to a B2B marketplace, you have to ask your question is, are you mobile ready? And this is why. If you see, on the slide in front of you, 75% of the recipients will delete an email if they can't read it on their mobile device. Not if it has a bad subject line or poor graphics or is not of interest. The bottom line is, can I read it? A great example for this for me is I'm a big soccer person. I'm a soccer fan. I'm a soccer lover, and I subscribe to a lot of different soccer things. And Soccer America is always the greatest soccer magazine out there. Yet their emails are completely 100% unreadable. Even though this is content I absolutely want to read when I open it up on my computer or on my cell phone, rather. It's an unreadable email, so I immediately delete it. So let's look at some of the other points here. Is the first question, again, that you have to ask yourself is, do you have permission? Email is a permission-based activity, so you really need to have permission. In the next few slides, we're going to take you through some examples of when you may think you have permission, but you really don't. There are laws in place to protect consumers, which is why this permission is so important. And we recommend that you have a double entry system for your email marketing program. So as we get into these cases a little bit, we'll talk about it. So you go online and you buy a list. You buy a list of users for your service or for your product. Obviously, this is an easy one. This is something you just buy a list. No one's given you permission to do that. Let's say you attended a trade show. You got a subscriber list from show management. It's a trade show in your industry. So you're going through that list. It came from management. You paid for a booth. Unless that show management has permission in writing from the people who are on that list, technically you don't have permission to then use that. How about people sign up on your own Facebook page where you get their email address when they sign up? Well, I'm a Facebook user. I've given my permission to use my email on Facebook. However, I didn't specifically give you permission, even though I signed up. You would think about adding a checkbox on your Facebook sign up that says, we'll be sending emails. Is it okay if we send one to you? And then in a live, retail environment, you might have a fishbowl on your counter. You raffle up a free lunch or a free this or a free that. And I choose to drop a business card in that fishbowl. Again, unless that sign over the fishbowl says, we're going to give away a free lunch and we're going to send you emails, you still don't necessarily have my written permission, but you've come closer to having permission because you've put it on your sign. The next set of examples are, for example, you're in real estate. You get a list from your local real estate organization, your broker, whoever it might be. Again, you need to check, did that broker gain permission? You own a restaurant, you have a card on the table that asks people to subscribe to your newsletter. I just saw this in a restaurant near my house. Now, in this case, the restaurant did have a checkbox that says, we will be sending you promotional emails. We want to communicate with you. Is that okay? As long as that box is there, you're good to go. Or you're sending emails to local members of an organization, a soccer club, Knights of Columbus, the Rotary, whoever it might be. You need to go backwards one step and check if people gave permission to do that. And then the final one is you went on LinkedIn, compiled a list of publicly, my profile's on LinkedIn, my email is there. Does that mean that you could send me emails trying to sell me something? On LinkedIn, it's probably a little bit of a gray area because people are trying to connect, but you should still be looking for some permission there. So let's get into email, the email itself. We've handled the permission part of it. How many times, from a question and answer standpoint, how many times have you received an email and never opened it? It's a laughable question because the numbers are probably very high based on how many emails a day you get. If you're like me, I probably see 200 to 300 emails a day. So there's a lot of time I get email, I never open it. The majority of the reason that would happen is because the subject line of that email just is not of interest to me. Didn't get my attention. There was no motivation there to make me take action. You need to keep in mind that the only purpose of your subject line is to get the reader to open your email. That's its job. Consider the subject line like a billboard to your email. If I can't make a decision in 3 seconds, if I want to read that email based on the subject line, there's a good chance I'm not going to read it. So let's talk a little bit about subject lines. What can you do with respect to them? As you see the bullets in front of you, shorter is better. Try to be 50 characters or less. That's including spaces, hyphens, and all those, those things. Avoid all caps and exclamation points. It may be, you may think you're yelling it so people are going to hear it better, but it is considered spammy when you use all caps and exclamation points. And email filters and programs will be looking for things like that to dump you into a spam file. You also don't want to use certain words like free, help, donate, assistance. Find other ways to say what you're trying to say, and we'll talk about that a little bit, without using those words, because those are also, especially the word free, are also considered somewhat spammy. As with all sales activities, you want to tell, don't sell. You want to be talking about benefits, not features. Not that something is X, but what does that X do for me as a potential user? So that's why you want to talk about benefits, not features. Sometimes asking a question works, preferably with a yes answer. Are you tired of starving yourself to lose weight? As opposed to buy this now because it'll help you lose weight. Just a little way of going about getting to the same point without using words that may be considered a little bit on the spam side. What else can we do with subject lines? You also want to stop. You want to potentially say something that's a little obscure. I poured my brain into this. Wow, that must be important. Or start a thought. Aren't webinars great when they're hosted by the Circl webinar series? Something like that to get your attention. You also want to create a sense of urgency, but there's a gray area between urgency and desperation. I'd hate for you to miss this instead of a sale ends today. So again, a subject line that might get my attention. The other thing to keep in mind that's not the subject line but stands above it is the from line. Very important, unless you're a known entity. If you're a known company, that's great. But if someone doesn't know your company but perhaps may know your name, it may be better to have your from your name, not your company. Again, every situation is going to be a little different, so you want to think about that. So now let's talk about the numbers a little bit. A lot of people just don't do the math, and it's sometimes a pain of an exercise, but you really, really, really need to think about your math. So let's talk first about the yellow box that you see. So this is an illusion or an imaginary email program we're going to do. So we're going to send 10,000 emails. If we get a 10% open rate, which is a high open rate, especially in unsolicited email programming, that would mean 1,000 people open your email, right? Pretty simple. Now let's say there's call to actions in those emails. So about 8% actually take you up and click through your email. That means 8%. So now 10,000 is down to 80, right? So 8% click-through would be a very high click-through rate. And then the final piece, which is not really, well, it is the job of the email is to drive conversion, but it's also the job of you, your website, or whatever else you're doing with this email program. Because once I've clicked through your email, I'm now off of your email. Where did it take me? It probably took me to your website. How many of those click-throughs will you convert? Well, if you convert 10%, 1 out of 10, which is a decently high conversion rate, that means out of the 10,000 emails that you sent, you got 8 sales. Numbers can be somewhat staggering sometimes, but you need to go through this exercise. So if you look at it from what did that cost you, a typical DIY campaign is going to cost you about $150 a month if you're using any one of the numerous services that are out there, and you're acquiring lists and you're doing everything you need to do. So when you look at this, you need to look at, well, what's your average sale? How much is your average sale, and how frequently do people buy? Do you sell something that sells for $10 or $10,000? So if you were to do this program at that cost, and you did it one time every 2 weeks to 10,000 people, you would yield approximately 16 sales. Looking at that and taking all these numbers into consideration, you must be generating more than a $9 profit just to break even. So if you're selling a $10 item and it costs you more than $1, or if you're selling a $20 item and it costs you more than $11, and these were your numbers, that's how you want to look at it. Now, clearly, this is a made-up situation, but you need to know these numbers for your own business, big or small, because these are the numbers that are going to work backwards to tell you whether this tactic is the right tactic for you to get what you want. Now, maybe what you want isn't sales. Maybe what you just want are people driving to your website. You just have to apply these same kind of metrics to whatever it is that you're looking to accomplish in order to figure out if this works. So let's talk a little bit about open rates. You heard me say the term open rate. Open rates are obviously one of the key elements of an email. And in front of you, you'll see some general categories or general industries. And you'll see means and median, top quartile and bottom quartile. These numbers I feel are a little bit on the aggressive side, especially the median numbers, but it shows you kind of a range of open rates by industry. And you just have to find your industry here and figure out where you might fall. So if you look at the worst performer, which is food service, sports, and entertainment, you're looking at a median open rate of 16.9. So obviously, that's the middle of the pack, meaning half are going to be higher and half are going to be lower. But even at 16.9%, that's a pretty aggressive open rate. However, if you look at how to help yourself from an open rate standpoint, you want to talk about the difference between a transactional email and a non-transactional email. The general open rates that we're talking about here are when you're going in somewhat unsolicited, or you're going in, to sell something on a mass basis. But what's a transactional email? So a non-transactional is, hey, I'm launching a new product. Isn't this great? Find out about me. Come to my website. You should buy. That's a non-transactional. A transactional email, though, are the emails that you send whenever something happened, a transaction happened, or some action happened. Someone comes to your website and you respond with an email. Thanks for visiting my website. That's technically a transactional email. Someone makes a purchase. All the things along those lines. You can see how the numbers jump dramatically from a transactional to a non-transactional email. So you want to make sure that you're making the best use of that email space. So not just sending, thank you for your order, here's your order number, but have some other offer there. That's an email that has space on it that you're not using all of if you don't do something like that. So that's what you want to look at, transactional versus non-transactional. So now let's look at click-through rates a little bit. So click-through is obviously the second most important. Once you get them open, then you have to get people to take action, right? That action could be a litany of things. It could be simply find more information, make a purchase, ask for details, have a salesperson call me, whatever it might be. But those are going to be action buttons that are going to be on your email. And you want to make sure that people click through them. The more they click, the better chance you have of getting them to do what you want them to do and sending them where you want them to go. So click-through is very important. So here's another chart that, again, takes you through by industry some of the click-through rates. See, the numbers just got a whole lot smaller, right? So if you were only getting 15 to 20% of your emails open, now on the worst side, look at insurance. Boy, is that scary. But, on a median side, you're 1% for media and publishing, 1.5% for schools and education, corporate services, 1.5%. On the high side, you're around 5 and change, right? And except for the top quartile of 16.3, but sometimes those are outliers and they're driven by other things. But what you want to think about with click-through rates is what is going to drive a click-through. So you think your subject line is the thing that's going to drive the open rate, right? So people see a subject that intrigues them, they're going to open my email. What's going to make them click? Well, there's only a couple things in that email that are going to make them click. It's not going to be the cool fancy typeface you use or the fact that your click-through may be in blue instead of black. It's going to primarily be the offer that you put out there and the sense of urgency that you build. If I put a 10% offer out versus a 30% offer, logic would say the 30% offer is going to click through higher. If I put an offer out that's 20% with no deadline, or I put 20% off and it expires, in an hour or 24 hours or this particular day, that's going to affect my click-through rate. So these are the things you want to think of. And what I recommend to people is don't get so caught up in just the numbers and, the fact that you're so close to your product or service. Take a half a step back and look at your own product or service as your consumer would look at your product and service. From the subject line to the click-through, view what you're doing as your prospective consumer would. And if you can't do that separation, find some people who can do it for you and ask them to help you out. And send them, hey, I'm going to send you an email. What do you think? Would you click on this? What would motivate you to do this? And that's how you want to approach, any email campaign or any email program. So as you see in the next slide, you'll see that, on the transactional versus non-transactional, again, a major jump when you see click-through rates on transactional emails. And it just makes sense, right? You build a sense of trust. That person's just done something. Well, now they're willing to do something else. You just made a sale. Thank you for your sale. Here's your order confirmation date. By the way, did you know a lot of people, when they buy what you bought, also buy this? Click here and check it out. That's an email that's got a transactional component to it and will get more people to click through for you. So as we come down the road now, it's great to look at all the numbers and look at all these things, but let's look at some examples. What are some email programs that have been done? And now, just so you understand, these email programs that I'm going to show you were all done in a particular industry. It was parents and students who were going to college, and they're done with, I have 2 big companies and 1 small company example to show you. The numbers are not the exact numbers. I did modify the numbers, but kept all the percentages and everything relatively, close to give you a good idea without giving away anything that's, that's not to be given away. But the first thing we're going to look at is the creative, and then we're going to look at the numbers that were generated by that creative, so you can get a better idea of how this really works. So as we turn to the first one, we're going to look at a DirecTV ad. I'm assuming people know who DirecTV is. DirecTV here was trying to sell their Sunday ticket streaming service, so you didn't need equipment. So clearly sending it out to a lot of people who were going to college as a student or as the parent this is an appropriate audience and a good audience. If you can see the student plans, the football in it, that's their subject line. Very good use of an icon there with that football. Think it's a good subject line. Good price is mentioned, but it's all about the student. You've seen the football in there. The creative it's okay. I don't think this is tremendous creative. I also don't think it's awful creative. Obviously, because it's DirecTV, you see as much disclaimer as you see headline, which is a little bit, I think it takes away from the appeal, but there's really no way around something like that. What is good, though, if you look at this piece of creative, is look at their Learn More button. Now, I think they're using the word learn because it's an education type of thing, and that's great. You could put any words you want in that blue box, act now, buy now, or whatever. DirecTV looks at their metrics a little bit differently, so they choose to words learn now, and they use it in a nice big blue box. I think it's kind of clear this is what we're selling, and if you want to learn more, you click here. So now let's take a little bit of a look at the numbers. As we look at the numbers, this was something that was done right around back to school time. Went out to an extremely large audience. 1.8 million emails were sent. 88% of those were delivered in gross numbers because they went to a very large list. But if we look at open rates, here you go. You're right in the line with about a 14% open rate as an average. It's probably about a little bit closer to 14.1 if you round it up. And interestingly enough, when we look at these types of programs in the business that I was doing this in, you look at, will the parents and the students open differently with the same piece of creative? And in many, many cases, the parents and students do open differently. In this case, absolutely didn't change at all. However, look at the click-through rate, and that changed pretty dramatically. Almost a twofold increase on click-through rate from parents versus students. Probably not surprising. Now, the parents maybe are clicking through to find out for themselves as opposed to their college student. But it's a very dramatic difference in gross numbers, not just percentage, 6,600 to 1,600. So when, again, looking at these numbers, going back to earlier in the presentation, look at the dramatic, effect here. 1.5 million emails were delivered. 218,000 plus or minus were opened, which generated 8,200 clicks. So a 4% click on the opens is what you netted out. Now, what does the conversion need to be to make this worthwhile? Looking at the cost of this program and so on, this is where companies like DirecTV figure out their metrics. I can tell you they came back and did it again, and they're going to do another program again this year. So I would say that these numbers are proving effective for them because they are, coming back to do it again. So now let's look at the next example. And the next example is Keurig, a name that probably everybody knows, at least, 90% of the people probably know it. Back to college type of subject line that you can see there. Not crazy about it. I think it's a little bit too long. If I did the number count, I bet it's over 50 characters. From a creative standpoint also, I find this creative to be a little confusing. What are they really selling? Can you figure out what they're really trying to sell here? Are they selling this package of stuff you get if you buy a Keurig? Do they want you to buy a Keurig? What do they really want you to do here? And where's the call to action? Little confusing, I thought. But again, we don't, in the downside sometimes of my part in this business is we don't necessarily always get to, we definitely never get the final say on creative. The client's always the client, and the client's always right. They get to do their creative, and we get to give them advice. So, end of the day, not the strongest creative, at least I don't think so. So now let's look at the numbers for this program. And you can see this program was sent out on a regional basis across different parts of the country, sliced and diced, so we could see if there's different reactions. On the gross basis, over 300,000 sent, about 300,000 delivered, very high deliverability, which is fantastic. When we look at the open percentage, again, on average, we're at 16.2%, which is a very respectable number from an open percentage. When you look at the geographic breakdown, though, you can see that perhaps the student portion of the Midwest really cared a lot less than pretty much anywhere else, specifically the parent section of the East or Southeast, which was up at 22%. So you can see how averages can play a part in this. That's why you want to, kind of slice and dice the best you possibly can here. Now, looking at that, however, here's a case where when we get to click-throughs, you want to look closely at your click-throughs and see, here's a perfect example of where I was wrong, thinking that the parents would click higher than the students. And I guess 2 out of 3, the parents did click higher than the students by a considerable amount. But when we come over to the east, southeast, it was almost double the students clicking over the parents. I'm not necessarily sure what that tells me, other than the fact that perhaps students drink more coffee or want to make their own coffee more than the students in California do, which could very well possibly be. But these types of numbers are used as kind of directional indicators for you to then dig deeper and see if you can figure out what's behind the screen and what's going on. We didn't really talk about unsubscribes on the previous one, but they were under 1%. You see unsubscribes here, under 1%. That's good news. You want to make sure your unsubscribe rate stays as low as possible. Anything over 1% usually gives us fits. We want to be careful that we don't get too high there, because obviously once someone unsubscribes here, depending on how you set up your unsubscribe language, they may be removing themselves from your list. And you don't want to lose people because they're your lifeblood. You want to keep as many people on the list as possible. So let's look at the last piece of creative, and this is a much smaller company. This company actually specializes in making semi-custom bicycles at semi-custom prices. So you get the equivalent of a custom bike, but you get the luxury of putting the main pieces together, and it arrives in a box for you and comes, and you take it from there. The prices are about 50% less than what you would pay for a custom bike, and about 50% more than you would buy at a Dick's Sporting Goods or someplace like that. So first you look at their subject line, campus bikes for 10% off. Good use of the word campus. 10% off, I would be very questionable about whether that's a large enough discount to put in a subject line. May want to rework that subject line a little bit. I don't know a lot of customers that jump up and down about a 10% off. So I don't know that I would put that in there. Obviously, you heard in the intro that I was formerly with Bed Bath & Beyond. And if you're listening to this, I would imagine you have at least one Bed Bath & Beyond coupon, and you know that Bed Bath & Beyond is very famous for their 20% off coupons. That's probably something I would put in a subject line. So now let's look at the creative a little bit. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. It's a bike to be used for college, and you can get 10% off. They did put a deadline on there, which is a great example. And they have a Shop Now button, big, bold, right over the model's head. Overall, simple creative is great creative sometimes. Think about creative for your emails as if you were designing a billboard, driving by on the New Jersey Turnpike at 70 miles an hour, because that's about how much time you have that someone's going to truly look at your email creative. So you always want to keep that in as your frame of reference. So now let's look at the numbers for this program. Clearly a much smaller program, 50,000 plus, great deliverability rate. In my opinion, extremely strong open rates, especially among students. Perhaps this means more to the student to have a bicycle than it did to the parent. However, the click-through rates were better on the parents. So a little bit of a dichotomy. You typically don't see it going in that direction. So it would be interesting to see, where this netted out for the client. Unfortunately, for my part of this is rarely do I get what the conversion rate was. If you're your own small business and you're looking to do these, you'll know your conversion rate, the sales you make or the actions that are taken, which will then drive how you tweak and change your upcoming programs. So in this case, though, the unsubscribes were a bit high. Not crazy about an unsubscribe rate that goes over 1%. In some cases, 1.6 when you got to the parents. Perhaps in this case, the parents felt like it was a little spammy maybe. They were not excited about being approached to buy stuff for their kids. But again, you can't make complete decisions based on one email. You have to look at multiple emails, multiple iterations. You need to do A/B testing. Put a piece of creative out for A, piece of creative out for B. Look at all the numbers. It's a constant tweaking and changing and making better when you're doing email marketing. This was a relatively quick presentation of some of the basics. It's clearly not everything you need to know, but I think if nothing else, I hope you come away from this presentation knowing that you need to look and know your numbers when you're doing programs like this. Email, while it is an inexpensive tactic, is not a free tactic. So, as it said in the beginning, what gets measured gets done. So please make sure that you're looking at your numbers. So that concludes the content portion of the presentation. We'll go to a Q&A portion now. If you have questions, you have the ability to post them, and they will then be sent over to me to potentially answer for you. If there are questions, I'd love to answer those questions now. And I hope that you got something very beneficial out of this presentation. My contact information is there if you'd like to reach out directly, and there's any way that I can possibly help you, I would love to do that as well. So I will now turn it over to the Q&A portion and see if there are going to be questions that need to be answered. Okay, it looks like I have a question. How often should you send an email campaign? Well, that's, Alicia, thank you for the question, first of all. That's always dependent on what you're trying to get accomplished, what your product or service is. If you have a little bit more information on your product or service, I could probably direct you more. I will turn it, though, back over to you, for example, and say, as a consumer, if you're a consumer-facing product, how often do you want to be emailed? There are absolutely no hard and fast rules. I'll give you a good example. Again, going back to my history, I'm from Bed Bath & Beyond, right? I spent time there as Director of Strategy. How many emails a day do you get from Bed Bath & Beyond if you're on their list? Is it one a day? Is it one every other day? Is it once a week? Again, it goes back to your product, your service. If you are a service provider or you're an agency, you might want to go once a week. If you're selling consumer products, you might want to go once every other day, possibly even once a day, depending on what it is that you're selling and how you're trying to get your message out. I would hope that you hold off a little bit and you send emails that are valuable to your recipient. There's a good offer, there's free shipping, there's some special program that you're offering, and use email to highlight those and then follow-up emails to do more. How do email marketing compare to direct mail is another question that I just see. Well, again, goes back to what you're selling. It's very, without knowing the product or industry, I can tell you that DirecTV is a great example of this. I don't think, and I don't think any marketer would say that one is the panacea and one is something you shouldn't do. All marketing should not be done in a vacuum. Marketing should be done in a full circular type of, no pun intended for the circle, but a circular type of approach. You want to approach and touch people in multiple ways, multiple different tactics. Email marketing from a cost perspective alone will be phenomenally less expensive than direct mail, right? Just think of direct mail alone, and that's going to cost you a lot of money to do that. Email is going to cost you an absolute fraction. On the other hand, going back to the DirecTV example, I know the DirecTV people feel very strongly in using both, but they like direct mail because they feel that people don't generally buy when they immediately get an email or an offer. They like to get that direct mail in someone's hands. They figure that a person's going to put it on the counter, and then the next time they have a problem with their cable company or something happened or there's something going on, that's when they might pick it up and take them up on the offer. So they don't use really short expiration dates for their offers, and they don't use immediately act now. What they use is something that's going to have a lifespan and stay around for a while. So Shante is asking, is using a discount service like Groupon beneficial? Absolutely. Why not use something like Groupon? However, and I would caution you, Google Groupon fail or other things that potentially can happen. Sometimes, with Groupon, you will oversell or sell more than you could possibly fulfill, and it could hurt you more than it can help you. So just be aware of what you're signing up for so that you know what the limitations are, both from a worst case scenario and a best case scenario. Now, typically with something like Groupon, you can limit the number of offers and things like that. But with something like a Groupon or all the other services that are out there, you're also going to be deeply discounting. If you don't have a high repeat purchase rate and someone's only using your product or service once every 6 months, you may be giving something away you'll never make money on. So again, just like email, you need to go look at your numbers, work your numbers, look at worst and best case, and then make decisions that way. Okay, so Steve is asking about the unsubscribe rate. Let me just read this question again. Ask that the unsubscribe rate goes up when open rate goes up, so people may respond positively or negatively. Any thought? I would ask really about volume with respect to that question. Your unsubscribe rate is going up when your open rate goes up. What's the offer? What's the product? What's the service? Is it controversy at all? Is it one of those things where people, take a very strong opinion on both, either one way or another? That would be something I'd want to know in order to be able to answer this question a little bit more thoroughly. But yes, if you're promoting something or sending out an email that's going to elicit a strong reaction one way or the other, that could be it. I would also ask about frequency. Frequency here is something that, also could possibly play into this. And if your frequency has gone up to a point where people, because you're more frequent, you may be getting it, then you also may be getting a higher unsubscribe rate because your frequency has gone up. So that's what I would do there. Again, I'd like to thank you very much for this opportunity. Please feel free to contact me here at my Twitter account or my email. And I look forward to working with you down the road. Thank you very much.
We want to thank all of our amazing speakers and our sponsors, NBC Universal, PSC&G, Yelp, ZD Glover Insurance and Financial Services, Women Tech Makers of New Jersey, and Websignia. And also our media and marketing partners, Capital Impact Group, the Statewide Hispanic Chamber of New Jersey, the SBA, New York and New Jersey Council, the SBDC at Rutgers, Newark, Social Vibes Media, and Greater Newark Enterprise Corporation. Special thanks to the Websignia team and all who have worked tirelessly to make this event possible. Once again, I'm Vicki Lorena from Social Vibes Media. See you inside the Circl soon.